Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Rachel and I am knitting. Not right now, but most of the time, and I will be knitting. In today's video, I'm going to investigate how much it costs to make a hand knit rat. Okay, before you just spiral into confusion and disgust, let me just explain a few things to you. I knit my first hand knit rat in March of 2021. Since then, it has become a joke of my life to knit rats, and it is what it is. So I very much enjoy knitting rats. I use the Rats pattern by Sarah Elizabeth Kellner. It's $2.50 on Ravelry, and I have absolutely made the most of that investment by making mini rats over the last 3 years. Now, I have been asked to make some hand knit rats as commission over the years, and I've charged, I think, $35 for a rat, and I think that's astronomically low. So today I'm going to figure out what is the right price for a hand knit rat. I don't know if I'll ever be commissioned for a hand knit rat ever again in my life, but if I am, I will have a pricing guide, and so will you if you're watching this video. You may be thinking, of all the things you could knit, why would you knit a rat? Listen, it's a long story, and if you want to know the full breakdown of why I started knitting a rat and how it became such a big thing, you can head over to my Instagram profile and look at the rats story highlight on my page, but we'll just leave it there for now in this video. I will say this is the second installment of my How Much Does Handmade Cost series, where I investigate the true cost of handmade so you can be knowledgeable and equipped when pricing your handmade items if that applies to you. It certainly applies to me from time to time, and I feel like I want to have the data to back up how I'm pricing things. So I'll be keeping track of a few different factors as I knit this rat. I'm pretty sure I can get it done from start to finish today, so if all goes to plan, I'll be filming my outro to this video later today, and I'll have the finished rat in hand. We'll see. But I'm going to be keeping track of the yardage I use, and for instance, like the weight of the polyfill that I'll be stuffing the rat with. And I'll also be keeping track of the time I'm spending. So I'll be calculating the cost of this item in two different ways, by materials alone and also by time with materials factored in. So, or I shouldn't say materials alone. I should say by materials as the starting point with a few other things factored in, and then with time as a starting point with a few other things factored in. This rat that I'm making today is not a commissioned piece. I'm making it for my niece who's on the way. So it's a totally gifted rat, and each of my nieces and nephews will have a rat by the end of the year. I've given my oldest nephew a rat for his birthday last year. I've given my niece a rat for her birthday this year. My other nephew has a birthday coming up. He'll get a rat. So all of the nieces and nephews will have a rat. So anyway, I thought that I would take advantage of this opportunity where I'm knitting a rat today and log basically the process so I can have the knowledge of how much a commissioned rat would cost in the future, should that day come, should anyone commission a rat from me again in life. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll grab the yarn, we'll weigh it so we have a good starting point metric, and then get to knitting. I'll be using leftovers of this Long Dog yarn, Merino DK. These are colorways that Brandy sent me to promote the Princess Bride collection back in February. This darker purple is called Never Go Against a Sicilian When Death is on the Line. It's a beautiful plum purple. And then this lighter color is called Is This a Kissing Book? And it's a really nice kind of dusty mauve, and they're going to go together, I think, beautifully for this rat. So the first thing I want to do is determine the weight that I'm starting with. So with Is This a Kissing Book? We're starting with 39 grams. And with Never Go Against a Sicilian When Death is on the Line, we're starting with 63 grams. Having these metrics is helpful, or 62 grams. Having these metrics is helpful because I'll weigh my leftovers after I'm done knitting the rat to determine how much of each color that I used in making the rat. So let's go get settled. I'm going to watch the 10 Commandments while I knit this because it's just a nice throwback to my childhood, and let's get going. Alright, so I have officially started the timer. I am pulling up the pattern and I'm grabbing my needles that I need in order to make the rat. I debated at first if I should count that in my timer or the time spent that I'm knitting the rat, but I decided ultimately that it was part of the process, so it should be within the time. And here I am just knitting away. I quickly learned that the 10 Commandments was the wrong film choice for knitting because, at least in the first part, it's so visually beautiful. There's so many vibrant colors. There's so many just beautiful scenes to look at. So this is definitely not the best knitting pair, film pair for knitting, because you can listen to it just fine, but really it's the visuals that you want to experience when watching this movie. But I powered through, focused on the rat, and kept knitting away. This is a relatively quick knit. I'll tell you later in the video how long it took me, but you can see I'm on the tail here and just trucking away. It's a really, really fast knit. If you're looking for a quick knit palette cleanser, may I humbly suggest a rat. And just like that, it is time to stuff the rat. I'm putting polyfill in there and using the chopstick that comes with the bag of polyfill to shape where the polyfill is going. Make sure that the rat is looking just how I want it to. And then it's time to knit the head. After the head is complete, it's the worst part. It took me an hour and 19 minutes to knit the body and the tail. Now we've got to do the ears, and then after the ears, it's the leg. And oh my gosh, I hate this part of knitting these rats because it's so tedious. The pieces are so small. There's a lot of seaming, which is arguably the worst part of doing anything. So yeah, this is really the worst. Maybe I should do these pieces first and get them out of the way next time. I don't know, but gosh, I just hate this part. Okay, checking in just shy of an hour later, I have the ears complete and sewn onto the rat, as well as some eyes for the rat, and I have knit 2 out of 4 legs. So we're at 2 hours and 9 minutes. All right, here I am restarting the timer because I had just gotten up to get a snack. I had cast on the 3rd out of 4 legs at the 2 hour and 9 minute mark, and I was just ready to just like destroy something. I was so cranky. So I decided, you know, Rachel, listen, it's not that serious. You're knitting a rat. Things certainly cannot be that bad. So I got up, I got a snack, I had apple and peanut butter. I felt so much better afterwards. It's an amazing life lesson that I always forget, that maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe I just need a snack. So I got an apple peanut butter and sat back down to complete the rat. And ta-da! 2 hours and 39 minutes later, we have a hand knit rat. Dun 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 dun! All right, it's a few hours later, and I have a completed rat. I like holding it like this. Feels powerful. I have a completed rat for my niece. Now I need to figure out how much it costs. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh out the yarn that I didn't use. So I have my cake of Never Go Against a Sicilian When Death is on the Line, which I used as my main color. And I have a cake of Is This a Kissing Book, which was my contrast color. So let's get that weighed up. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do to figure out how much yarn I used is to reweigh my skeins. So let's start with a contrast color. When I first started today, this was 39 grams, and now it is 34 grams. So I used 5 grams of the contrast color, Now with the main color, when I started today, I had 62 grams, and now I have 45 grams. So I used 17 grams of the main color. Together, that means there's 22 grams of the main color and the contrast color, but not all 22 of those grams of yarn will be in this rat because I have a pile of scraps here, and I am going to count these towards the yarn I used because these aren't really usable anymore, and they were, you know, part of the process of knitting this rat. So I'll go ahead and weigh those, and that's 4 grams of scraps. So altogether, I should have 18 grams of yarn in this rat. But this rat is not going to weigh 18 grams because it's stuffed with polyfill. So I'm going to put this on the scale and figure out how many grams of polyfill are in the rat. So 32 minus 18, meaning 14 grams of polyfill in this rat. All right, I've just crunched the numbers without recording because you don't need to watch my face scrunch up and be confused when I deal with numbers. So I went ahead and did that off camera. I have it all written out in my notebook, but I just want to go over the stats with you. Let's break this down. How much does it cost to knit a hand knit rat? How would I price this if I were taking a commission? Now, here's the thing. This is obviously a quirky item. This is not a necessity. This is not a I don't know. It's not something anybody needs. And I also don't want to say it's a luxury item because it's literally a hand knit rat. Okay, it's just like a specialty item, basically. It's very niche, it's very weird, whatever. Okay, so it's a hand knit rat. If you're in the market to commission a hand knit rat, chances are, like, it's very important for you to have that item for whatever reason. Okay, great. So let's go over the cost breakdown. I'm going to break down the cost of materials, then the cost of my time, and then finally I'll go over the cost of the rat if we were going by the yard as opposed to by the hours worked. So I have everything written down here. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notebook. So if you're confused why my eyes look down here, that's why. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about the specs. So like I just said in this last clip, I used 22 grams of yarn total. 18 of those grams are actually in the rat. The other 4 are in these scraps. So in the first set of calculations I'll do, I'm not going to take in these 4 grams into account when calculating the cost of the rat, just because it would just be, you know, a fraction of a penny basically, or a couple fractions of a couple pennies. But I will factor in the weight of the scraps when I calculate the price by yard. Okay, so just bear with me. I haven't forgotten about the scraps. Okay, so first of all, let's go over just like the cost of materials. So for this first set of calculations, I'm counting 18 grams of yarn used for this rat. If I'm using a skein, that's $30 a skein at 246 yards per 100 grams. Using 18 grams calculates to a cost of $5.40. Now, keep in mind that there's a few different things that could change that. For one thing is, am I using scrap yarn or am I purchasing fresh skeins? Typically, when I knit rats, I'm able to easily find some DK weight scraps or fingering weight scraps that I can hold double to knit the rat, so it comes directly from my stash, meaning the cost of the yarn is just going by the yardage. However, if I were to get a commission that required specialty yarn where I was purchasing a fresh skein where I didn't have the option available in my stash, that raises the cost of materials like through the roof. Instantly, it's astronomically more expensive because the rat requires 2 colors, A skein of hand-dyed yarn could go anywhere from $28 to $33. Even if I'm using a commercially dyed skein of yarn, like for instance Cascade 220, that would be anywhere from $10 to $13 a skein. So the price goes up a lot if you're using fresh skeins, or meaning that you're buying the yarn. You're not using scraps from your stash and calculating the yardage just based on the scraps. So we're just calculating based on scraps. If I were to buy fresh skeins, the price goes immediately up, okay? But based on just this yardage, it's $5.40 for the yarn used in the rat. The other material that's present in the rat is polyfill, and I use a portion of this very large bag of polyfill. This is a 50-ounce bag. You can get polyfill from all sorts of different places. I don't remember where I got that bag of polyfill whenever I got it, but it is something that I keep in my crafts closet and I use often for multiple projects. But it's a 50-ounce bag, and I found that same bag available for $14.97 online at Walmart. So that's just the metric I'm going to go with. The price may vary depending on where you're purchasing and what size bag you're purchasing. But $14.97 total material cost between yarn and polyfill is $5.55. Another cost, material cost, that goes into making the rat is the actual pattern itself. The pattern on Ravelry costs $2.50, so adding that to my $5.55 total so far, that brings up to a final material cost of $8.05. So $8.05 in materials. Again, this is when using scrap yarn, not buying fresh skeins. Okay, buying fresh skeins could raise that price significantly. So we're going to go ahead with the metric of $8.05 for my material cost. Now let's talk about the cost of the time spent. So I spent 2 hours, 39 minutes, and 23 seconds to knit this rat. I kept track of it on the stopwatch app, the clock app on my phone, and then I put that into a time to decimal converter online. I didn't figure this out myself, but that translated to 2.6564 hours. So just over 2.5 hours to complete this rat. Okay, so now what is the cost of 2.6564 hours of work? Well, that depends. I think that this is a personal choice, how you are going to pay yourself hourly if you choose to calculate an hourly wage for your handmade items. But I'm going to give a few options, starting with $7.25. That's a horribly low number, but it's the minimum wage for where I live here in Louisiana. So we're just going to go with that as our baseline. This is not the number that I'm going to go with. I would never go with $7.25 an hour for my handmade commissions. So, but we're just doing a baseline here. So if I multiply $7.25 by 2.6564 hours, that gets me to $19.26. Okay, so that would be the cost of labor at $7.25 an hour wage. If I move to $10 an hour wage, then the cost of labor goes up to $26.56. If I pay myself $15 an hour, the cost of labor goes up to $39.85. If I pay myself $20 an hour, the cost of labor goes up to $53.13. And finally, if I pay myself $25 an hour, which is my preference with handmade items, the cost of my time spent goes up to $66.41. All right, so we've got $8.05 for the materials, and I have a range to choose from $19.26 to $66.41 for the time spent knitting. All right, but that's not all that should be factored into pricing a handmade item. In addition to this, it's standard or expected or justifiable to add an overhead margin, both by adding $1 to $3 to your figure of cost and materials and then multiplying that by 1.75. I'm getting this metric from Knititude and her pricing highlight on Instagram. This has wiggle room. You can go with what works for you and what you feel is a fair price to ask for your labor. Basically, you need to price your items, or at least I think, I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, I think that items should be priced in a way that make it worth it to spend your time making them. Like, here's the thing. If I am taking time out of my allocated knitting allotment or whatever I have in my schedule for that day or week or month that I can devote to knitting what I want to knit for myself, if I'm choosing to cut that time away down by giving out the time for commissions, I want to make sure that the commissions are worth my time and that I'm not regretting taking on a commission and taking time away from things that I would rather be making for myself. So, yeah. But, okay, so if I take those figures, the hourly wage plus the cost of materials, my costs are going to be much higher than simply adding the cost of time and the cost of materials. So for instance, at a $7.25 hourly wage, if I add $1 to $3 and the cost of materials together, and then I multiply that figure by 1.75, depending on if I'm adding $1 or $3, I could end up anywhere from $49.54 to $53.04. Again, that is with the $7.25 hourly wage as the starting point, and that is not where we're going to stay. I am not doing that for my handmade items. If you feel comfortable doing that, go for it. It's not what I want to do with mine. So let's move on to what happens if you charge $10 an hour. So with $10 an hour plus the $8.05 of materials plus $1 to $3 for overhead multiplied by 1.75, we end up anywhere from $58.82 to $62.32. So we're climbing here. Moving on to $15 an hour plus cost of materials, plus profit margin, plus overhead, we end up with $85.58 to $89.08. Next, at the $20 rate, we end up with $108.82 to $112.32. And finally, at the $25 an hour range, we could end up anywhere from $132.06 to $135.56. So this is a huge range when you are factoring in the cost of materials along with the time spent knitting, plus your profit margin and your overhead. The range could be anywhere from $49.54 to $135.56. So there's a lot of things to think about and to factor in as you're making your prices. Now, here's the thing. I have a very vivid imagination, but I cannot imagine a world where someone is going to pay me $135 for me to knit them a rat, okay? If, like, I don't know, that is a lot of money for a specialty item like this that really has no purpose other than, I don't know, bringing joy. Not to say that that's not valuable, like that is, but whatever, different strokes for different folks. This just seems like $135 for a rat. I just don't know. So when I was thinking about how to price this, I was thinking that a sweet spot would be $75. But the more that I thought about it, I really think that that is shortchanging the effort that goes into this and the time that goes into this, and not necessarily the fact that this is a difficult 2.5-hour project, but more so that it's a 2.5-hour project that takes time away from other things I could be doing. So with all that in mind, I think that I've decided when I price this for future commissions, I will be charging $100. What this ends up being, if you break it down, is $18 an hour plus $1 of overhead multiplied by that 1.75 figure. That actually ends up being $99.51. Round up to $100 and you have a rat. Do I think anyone will pay me $100 to knit them a rat? No, I don't think so. And that's okay, because I think that's what it is worth. That's what I need to justify my focus, deviating from where it otherwise would be. That's what it's worth to me to devote 2.5 hours to a commission. So that's the choice that I've made for my prices. It doesn't have to be the choice that you make for yours, and maybe it means that I'll never get a rat commission ever again in the history of my whole life. Guess what? That's fine with me, because I'm not going to stop knitting these. I knit these for gifts all the time. Like I said, all of my nieces and nephews will have one of these rats by the end of the year. It's just like, you can't get rid of them. They're going to be out in the world. But yeah, I wouldn't just, carve out time to make one of these unless it was for someone who's knit worthy and a gift I want to make, or I was commissioned $100 to make them. And that's just a choice that I'm making. You might disagree with it, you might think it's silly, but I really think that it's important that we don't take on commissions that are shortchanging or short selling ourselves. I think time is really, really valuable. And yeah, I've been knitting for, I don't feel like I should justify this, but like, it still sounds absurd to charge $100 for a rat. But it did take me 2.5 hours, over 2.5 hours to knit this. I have been knitting for over a decade, for 15 years this fall. And, I know it's a rat, but it's not like I just woke up and was able to knit a rat. There's a lot of skill that went into me being able to do this. Whatever. Okay, so $100 for a rat. But there are other pricing strategies that you could employ when pricing out your handmade rats or handmade whatever, and that is by charging by the yard. So I'll tell you up front that the price for a knit rat when charged by the yard is drastically different than a knit rat when charged in the way I've just walked you through. This is, I don't know. If I were to charge a commission on a sweater and charge by the yard, I think that it would be probably comparable with charging by the hour. But for a knit rat, the yardage is very, very meager, and it does not does not directly correlate to the time spent making the rat. I think partly because there's a lot of time spent seaming this rat, like sewing the ears together, sewing the legs on. So the yardage is not necessarily indicative of the time spent, but we'll still calculate out the yard cost. So now we're returning to these 4 grams of scraps. I'm counting these 4 grams in the metrics of these calculations just because these are part of the material cost when factoring in yards. They were still the material cost earlier, but it's going to make more of a difference to count them in now as opposed to by gram. So if I'm using 22 grams of yarn total for the rat between the rat body and the scraps that I used, that translates to 52.12 yards because I'm pulling from skeins that have 246 yards per 100 grams. If each yard costs 30 cents, because these skeins are $30, then that material cost brings us to $16.24. I got confused for a second because I was thinking, why is that figure so different than the $5.40 figure for the 18 grams in the previous calculations? But it's because we're multiplying it by 30 cents. So 30 cents for every yard, that adds up to $16.24. Okay, so at this point I need to come in and add a voiceover because when I was filming this, I got mixed up and I thought that the $16.24 replaced the cost of materials meaning it replaced the cost of the yarn and it replaced the cost of the pattern. I didn't factor those two things in. So here's the breakdown of what that cost would be. We have the 55.12 yards multiplied by 30 cents a yard. That's basically the cost of labor. Instead of charging by the hour, charging by the yard. So the $16.24 is the cost of labor. We still have to add in the $8.05 of the cost of materials, meaning you're still accounting for the cost of the yarn, you're still accounting for the cost of the polyfill, and you're still accounting for the cost of the pattern. That gives us the number $24.29. Add the $1 to $3 of overhead to that and multiply that number by 1.75, and that is what gives you the final range for this pricing option where you're going by the yard instead of by the hour, which gives us a range of $44.26 to $47.76. All right, with all of this in mind, with both pricing structures broken down, we have the final range for a hand knit rat that takes 2 hours, 39 minutes, 23 seconds with $8.05 in materials. The final range is anywhere from $44.26 to $135.56. So let's go back to past Rachel and hear more about my thought process about how to charge this. Will I stay at the $100? Let's find out. Now, I can hear you saying, like, Rachel, it's a rat. You cannot charge $100. Or maybe you're not saying that. Maybe it's just, you know, the devil on my shoulder, the rat on my shoulder, saying that to me. Like, that's an absurd amount. But 2.5 hours of labor is not, I don't know, it's not nothing, even if the labor is producing a ridiculous thing. So I'm going to stick by that. In many ways, handmade is all around us. You know, I don't think there's any such thing as, I don't know, something that's totally machine made. Like, people are operating these machines, but I don't know. See, I feel weird about this. I feel weird and icky to say a rat is $100, but okay. So like, after all this talking, I feel like I need to give myself a way out. I need to give myself something to, I don't know, give myself an out. So I'm going to change my price. I'm going to say that $100 will be on the high end of commissions that I would take for a hand knit rat. But I would be comfortable taking a commission for as low as 75 to 80 to 85. Yeah, so okay, so I think $75 to $100 is something that I personally would feel okay with for a commission of a hand knit rat. And if that's too much, it's okay. You will survive without a hand knit rat. But I don't want to get in the habit of undercharging myself, because then it creates this cycle where I take commissions and I'm just miserable when I'm working on the commission because I feel like, oh, this is just not worth my time. I could be spending this time knitting something that I actually want for myself or that I have in mind for a gift or something like that. So I don't know. There are so many layers to this. I don't know. But all I know is these are the facts in terms of the data of the time spent, the materials needed, and things like that. So at least for me, I would charge $75 to $100 for a hand knit rat. I think that lower than that is really getting into dangerous territory, at least for me, with the time it took to knit this and the materials that I used for it. Certainly you could make this for less material cost. You could use commercially dyed yarn, you could use acrylic yarn, you could use thrifted yarn. Like, there's a lot of options out there. So like, just know that it feels ridiculous to say this is a $75 to $100 item, but that's just what the facts are saying. That's what the metrics are telling us. And even when I feel self-conscious and don't believe it, I need to remind myself that my time is valuable and I don't want to get in the habit of short selling myself. So there you go. That's it. What do you think? What would you charge for a hand knit rat? Would you charge less than I decided? Would you charge more than I decided? Would you never knit a hand knit rat in your whole dang life? Any answer is okay. Let me know in the comments. I'm so curious what you think. Is this an astronomically absurd figure to land on, 75 to 100? Let me know. If you think this is reasonable, please validate me in the comments. Like, I didn't set out to choose that this would be the price. It just is what the data is telling me. So there you go. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and hit that notification bell to be notified of my next upload. Last but not least, head over to Instagram and follow me at Rachel is Knitting if you don't already. All right, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!